Professor Kosoy, can you hear me?
I should unmute my microphone first of all.
Hey, hello.
Nice to hear you again. Nice to hear you.
No, so I'm very pleased to see you again. So how are you?
Yeah,
it was a long time since we didn't have the possibility to see each other. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. But this morning I tried to count. It's mostly 30 years we know each other.
Yeah.
30 years.
So how are you? How is your life?
Everything is under control. I still be director of the institute. You see backside, you visited this institute. Oh, sorry.
Did these two institutions merged, the Academy of Refrigeration with the other institute of food?
Yes. It was happened, I guess, 8 years ago. Actually, the story is very interesting because at the very beginning, around 70 years ago, it was the same institute. Then after the Second World War, it was separated, and then it was merged again. So who knows, this is a story, but I still the director of our institute already 6 years. Oh, sorry, I'm using my phone, that's why my camera is not very stable.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
Can you tell me how long time will be today for all?
So we are planning to have about 2 hours.
Only 2 hours, yes?
Yeah.
So one hour.
Will be the first part an introduction. It will be then the main lecture of Enrico. And then it will be the last part for the discussions.
I see. Actually, I invited two my master students from the Technical University of Berlin because Tanya Marazyuk, you remember her? She is now there, and she invited me this year to be a supervisor for master's thesis for the students. And also you will see maybe some people from our department of thermodynamics. But as for me, maybe I will leave in 1 hour for say half of an hour because I have a meeting and then I will be back. So please just take me back.
Okay. No, you will be in this. You will be in this panel. So if you get out, then we shall follow this. And when you will enter again, then yes. We shall. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Actually, that was the reason why I use my iPhone, because I will move and try to hear what is going on.
Thank you. It was very great pleasure for me to.
Me too.
Bye. See you later. Okay. Hello, Professor Shuba, can you hear me?
Hello, Eden.
Hello, Professor Shuba. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm just getting my new earphones on. You know that today is a holiday in Italy. You are forcing me to work during our Feast of Republic.
So is this a Christian?
No. It's a celebration of the year 1945, I think, when the Republic was established.
Oh, well, in this case, we are celebrating in a very...
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So these are the, let's say, ways of celebrating. You know, there is also an old saying which points out on this fact. Tell me how somebody is behaving when he's celebrating something very important for himself.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that would be a good example because I'm working today.
Yeah.
Some colleagues already reprimanded me because I told them that I was lecturing, and they said, you shouldn't do it on such a vacation or such a holiday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me introduce Professor Salioglu. Hello, Professor Salioglu.
Hi, how are you?
Good night, Professor Salioglu.
Thank you.
So
I imagine if in Rome they are smoking cigars, maybe somewhere in Mersin there should be also some kind of chubuk.
Yes. I'm not as lucky.
Yeah. It's a habit. It's a habit. Nasılsınız, Professor Kosoy?
I've seen Professor Kosoy just a few minutes ago. He joined for just for introduction, but he said that he's in a meeting. You know, he's the rector now of his university in Odessa. And hello, Professor Kosoy.
I'm here. Still here.
Okay. So, with your permission, I would suggest to start and to see on the road how is going to happen, because I'm sure that each of us we have plenty of other activities. So, with your permission, I would like to. Just 1 second. So, I hope that you can see the screen.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank first to Professor Enrico Schuba, because he is the, let's say, main lecturer today. But also I would like to thank Professor Barış Salioglu. He is the director of the Institute for Marine Studies of the Middle East Technical University in Ankara. And he is coordinating a very important project, which is called the Black Sea Connect project. So Professor Salioglu, hello and thank you.
Hello, and I would like to thank for the invitation. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now, second, I would like to kindly ask the participants to use the possibilities for interaction. So you have the possibility to raise any kind of question, and we shall reply to those questions during the presentation. And at the same time, of course, if you want to outline something, you have the option of chat. So these two options are very important aspects to interact. So just in order to move a little bit quicker with this event, we have to say that this event, the so-called BSUN Master Course on Blue Growth, is an initiative of the Blacks Universities Network, which has been in line with the Blue Growth Initiative that was, let's say, developed in our region in the last almost 10 years, we could say. But of course, the most important aspects have been developed starting with 2015, when the European Commission by DG Mare supported the let's say organizations of this region to develop a strategic research agenda for scientific research and innovation on blue growth, and all the other activities that will be pointed out later on by Professor Sarioglu. So I would like to say that our wish is that these kind of, let's say, reference courses to be recorded and to make them available to all universities of the region to be used in different study programs. So from that perspective, we started about 1 month ago with a dedicated course on microbiology and genetic engineering, which has been a very successful course. We shall continue after this course with the different other courses related to the topic of blue growth. So now I would like to motivate why we are coming to thermodynamics in order to rediscover and redefine sustainability. So you know very well that the problem which is considered one of the, let's say, major indicator of the development of the society is the energy consumption. And the energy consumption has been connected to all aspects of mankind development. So let us look to this first slide. On the left side, you can see the evolution of demographics at global scale. And you can see that, let's say, almost 1 century ago, we could say that it has started the process of unprecedented growth of the world population. And on the right side, you can see that many other processes might have an association to this or might be considered of similar evolution. Like you can see the CO2 concentration, you can see the water use, you can see the number of species in extinction, you can see the exploitation of fisheries, and many other processes that are in some sense related to this process of the growth of world population. At the same time, we can say that the evolution of the society was also driven or connected to energy. So this theory, which is the so-called transient pulse theory, which says that the point D in this diagram, which is the moment when the Industrial Revolution started, it was the pulse that started with the, let's say, unprecedented development of the mankind civilization, which brought the man to reach unbelievable achievements like the space programs, and also a very, very well standard of life, something that couldn't be even believed in the past. But at the same time, the evolution of the resources put a lot of pressure to keep this standard of life. And unfortunately, the passage of the time and the reduction of the resources is following a process of degradation of all these standards. And of course, somewhere in the future, it is expected that if we shall not take care of resources and the possibilities of substituting them, then we can go back to the, let's say, past of the human evolution. So the major problem is, besides of the access to resources, is also the way in which we are using them. So in this picture here, we can see that, generally speaking, the current civilization, the current mankind civilization, is following this process. So from 100 units of raw materials, of energy resources, we are producing somewhere around 30% high level energy, which is the electricity. And then many of these units are lost during the transport. And at the end, we have at the final use something around 10 units. So from 100 units raw materials, we are getting at the final end use something like 10 units. Of course, in some cases, the percentage might be higher than 10, in some other cases might be lower than 10, but more or less, this is the efficiency of using the resources. And of course, the waste is sometimes extremely dangerous. And among the waste and the emissions, we are talking about the CO2 concentration, which in this pictogram can be faced with the fact that almost with the same period of human evolution, we are discussing also about a jump of carbon dioxide, but also of different other gases that are extremely important in changing the habitat and the environment. So here, there is just a pictogram that is pointing on the fact that actually the way of which we have followed the evolution of our civilization put in atmosphere huge quantities of carbon. So you can see here these red lights. The first, let's say, major input of carbon in the atmosphere is coming from the use of fossil, and the other one from the changing of the land use. These two major resources, of course, are not only, but are the major resources that have a huge input on carbonizing the atmosphere and the environment. What's the problem with that? Generally speaking, we are teaching the kids in the school that the Earth has been possible to, let's say, host the life in the way that we are used to due to the greenhouse effect. The atmosphere actually is a shelter, is producing, let's say, a very important set of functions that are protecting the life in this way. And due to the existing of the greenhouse effect, actually, we have a milder and acceptable type of habitat. But of course, the problem is not the greenhouse effect on itself, is the, let's say, higher and higher and increasing aspect of the greenhouse, which is leading to climate change. And in this picture here, we can see that climate change has two faces of the coin. One is about understanding the process and discovering what is changing the climate. And the other one is about adaptation. So to understand where we go and to try to, let's say, prepare ourselves for what is going to happen. And unfortunately, if the things will move like that, the degradation of the climate, the changing of the climate will be extreme. So we can see here from these simulations that in the coming decades, the, let's say, drought, the depletion of water will be extremely significant for many regions, and particularly for our region in the Black Sea area. But not only this, this is a tornado in Sevastopol a few years ago. This is another tornado just few kilometers from here, and this is another one in another city in Romania. So extreme type of phenomena are getting closer and closer to us. So in that context, as I said, the first part of the problem is how to do and what to do in order to decrease these consequences. And this is by the reduction of CO2 emissions, and different types of solutions are on the way and will be explained by Professor Shuba later on. But at the same time, we have to understand the range. So we have to understand that the effort that has to be done in order to reduce the level of CO2 emissions is very high. And we have to not hide ourselves behind words saying that we can do that and that, but to be very honest and to understand exactly the level of the effort that has to be done. Of course, if we follow the decision makers, the politicians, they finally arrive to a conclusion that this can be done very simply by low carbon, resource efficiency, and social inclusiveness. So these three aspects are very simple to be exposed in different type of speeches. But we shall see that they are not very easy to be implemented. In order to do that, at the level of the United Nations, it has been initiated the system of Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, it was a large conference in New York, and the General Assembly adopted these goals. Among them, the SDG 7 is referring particularly to energy. And for SDG 7, available and affordable energy, there are a number of targets. You can see them indicated here, and a number of indicators. And based on these indicators, then there is a system of evaluation, like they take the performance in 2015, they count the level of indicators, and based on the position of these indicators, a country might be in the situation of green, which is on track, or might be in, let's say, a very bad position, and they have to take different type of measures in order to do that. And for doing that, for instance, in each country, I took the case of Romania, there are national strategies for sustainable development. Like in our case, 2 years ago, it was approved, this national strategy. There is a department under the level of the government, which is following all these indicators. And for each of these indicators, they were defined different type of institutions that are let's say, responsible to count, to measure the above mentioned indicators. But the problem is a little bit more complicated, and is getting more complicated when we are coming closer to the sea, because the truth is in water, as we say. So generally speaking, The problem is that, for instance, in the case of the neighborhood with coastal areas, we have the oceans and the seas. And at the level of the oceans of the sea, the CO2 from the atmosphere is absorbed. And this is generating the acidification of the seas. The acidification, which is not something that is jumping with different units of acidification from one day to another. The movement is slow, but this movement is not only generating something that we can see, like is the shell of, let's say, different type of mollusca, that due to the acidification is going to be, let's say, depleted, and at the end, mollusca will not have shells. But this is just one part of the problem. The reality is much, much harder than that, because any kind of very tiny modification of acidification in the water is generating at the level of the microbiota some changes which cannot be covered, not only in few years, not only in decades, but even in centuries. The second problem, which is also very complicated, is the problem of eutrophication. Because at the end, all the, let's say, wastes are coming into the water. All the sanitation, all the underground are connected to the coastal waters. And the eutrophication process is generating also a very difficult and complicated process with a complexity of factors into the water. Like you can see here in the case of the Black Sea, we have the huge inputs of nutrients coming from the Danube, coming from Dniester or Dnieper, the largest rivers that are washing hundreds of thousands of square kilometers and are bringing all these nutrients and waste into the water of the sea. That is also passing, you can see on the right side, different evolutions that are also extremely dangerous for the future. And the things are not stopping here, because you can see here there are some aspects related to the sea level. And here I'm talking about adaptation. We have to take into consideration the fact that the level of the sea will increase, not from one day to another, not from 1 year to another, or even from one decade to another, but we shall see in the coming decades a continuous increasing of the level of the sea. And this is going to generate something also very, very dramatic. For this reason, in the, let's say, coastal areas, we are talking about blue growth. And the concept of blue growth will be presented by Professor Salioglu, when we can see here that is a package or a subset of tools and approaches and policies and strategies that have to be considered as part of the larger effort of humanity to cope with the issue of climate change. How to do and what kind of things can we do at the level of ourselves, of the usual beings? So in our case here in Constanța, we are addressing the problem by defining some living laboratories. So here on the left side, you can see that at the level of the municipality of Constanța, we took the initiative to organize a living laboratory on the way in which the utilities have to be addressed in the new context, by integrating more and more renewables in producing heat and cooling and connecting with other utilities. On the right side, you can see another living laboratory for a larger scale, where you can see here that around the Black Sea Danube Canal, we are also developing the concept of a living laboratory, which is called Constanța Blue Bay, in order to orchestrate the local authorities to address these problems. So instead of conclusions, and of course, this will be further developed by the distinguished speakers that we have today. Of course, in the case of energy, we have to start with the first step, which is reduce energy consumption. And this is valid for everything. So we have to reconsider our lifestyle, reconsidering any kind of consumption. Doesn't matter if we are talking about products or about services. In the second step, we are talking about improvement of efficiencies over the entire value chain. So to increase the level of using the resources, and in this way to reduce at the end the scarcity of those resources. And finally, to think about renewables. So I would like to close with this drawing, where you can see here on the left side is the old type of thinking in white and black. So there is no choice between yes or not. There is no choice between 0 and 1. And unfortunately, most of our society is based on this type of logic. We have to find out the ways to reconsider the way in which we are judging in a, let's say, quantum type. You see the qubit, where between yes and no, between 0 and 1, there are almost no differences. Thank you for your attention. And of course, if there are some questions, please do not hesitate to write them on the Q&A button. And with your permission, I would like to invite Professor Salioglu for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahmoud, for the invitation and for the nice introduction. I guess you can hear me well and you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, everything is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And actually, I'm quite happy to see Professor Mahmoud's presentation, because mine is quite parallel to his. It will build on what he has presented. But today I will tell you more on our efforts towards how we are trying to establish a healthy, resilient, and economically prosperous Black Sea. And as Prof. Mahmoud has already presented, Black Sea is unique in many ways. First of all, Black Sea is a natural laboratory for us researchers. It's 90% oxygen-free, and its ecosystem is acting under many stressors. And one of the main ones is eutrophication, as we have seen, and because many large rivers are flowing into it. And 160 million people are populating at the coast and catchment area of the Black Sea. And Black Sea is a huge catchment area. The area of the Black Sea catchment to the sea basin is 5 times than the sea basin itself. And these stressors that act on the Black Sea is not only eutrophication, but also climate change is affecting it. Warming is there, deoxygenation is there, ocean acidification, overfishing, invasive species, and sea land-based sector activities, they all are there. And these are affecting the habitats and the resilience of the ecosystems. Therefore, the services that the Black Sea provides is also affected. And we need to find a way, using the technology, to better manage the Black Sea. It's one of the fastest warming European sea basins. as you can see here. And it's with this dotted blue line. And we have seen that during the last 20 years, the sea surface temperatures has increased almost 2 degrees. While this was increasing, also the other stressors has modified the whole ecosystem. From the pristine state to today, the whole ecosystem has gone through several regime shifts. And one of them is that the fish population was dominated by larger fish in 1980s, and gradually these fish were removed with increasing fisheries, and smaller fish started to dominate the ecosystem. And because of high nutrient inputs, also the chlorophyll levels has increased. And afterwards, it became a jellyfish dominated system, and the fish population has completely collapsed. The catch went to 150 kilotons per year, and now it's still at the same levels. And the benthic ecosystem is almost completely gone. And the climate is definitely causing very interesting changes. One of the unique structures of the Black Sea is the cold intermediate layer that sits, let's say, around 75 meters. It has completely disappeared. And this is changing the circulation system of the Black Sea as well, and it's changing the production patterns in the Black Sea, and they are also decreasing. Okay, so we know that all these stressors are acting on the Black Sea, but what can we do for a sustainable use of its resources? The European Commission has adapted the Blue Growth Strategy recently. And it's a long-term strategy that supports the sustainable growth in the marine and maritime sectors as a whole. It is important because it both protects the ecosystem and the economy together. It's a means to provide more jobs with better values of the products. And we have defined some initial priority areas. These are biotech, mineral resources, renewable energy, tourism, and sustainable seafood in the Black Sea. And to achieve a sustainable economy in the Black Sea, the blue growth in the Black Sea, with the support of the European Commission, we have launched the Black Sea Blue Growth Initiative in 2017. And we have started developing the strategic research and innovation agenda for the Black Sea right after that. And we have underlined the main characteristics of this strategic document in 2018, and we have launched the Burgaz Vision Paper. And afterwards, the Bucharest Declaration was signed in 2019 by all the countries. And to support this agenda, the Commission has funded the Black Sea Connect project that I'm coordinating at the moment with, together with institutions from all the Black Sea countries, and together with Black Sea Universities Network and also Black Sea Economic Cooperation. And we made the kickoff meeting of this project in 2019 December. And one of the first things that we did is we did the national stakeholder consultation meetings in each country. And we have launched afterwards the Black Sea Young Ambassadors Program. So what is the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda? First of all, it's a reference framework that supports all the stakeholders, from academia to funding agencies to industry, policymakers, and society. And it addresses all the economic activities, both the established sectors such as shipping, shipbuilding, fisheries, and tourism, but also the emerging new sectors such as blue biotechnology, offshore wind, ocean energy, coastal and environmental protection. And one of the key outputs will be the development of national blue growth agendas. And it will provide science-based and well-informed decision making. And it is agreed as the scientific pillar of the Common Maritime Agenda that is endorsed by the ministers of all the Black Sea countries. So the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda has 4 pillars. The first one is the knowledge bridge, which addresses the fundamental Black Sea research challenges. The second one is the blue economy. The third one is the key infrastructures and policy enablers. And the fourth one is education and capacity building, which also highly relates to the meeting today. And Black Sea was the last basin that has developed its research and innovation agenda. So the Atlantic Ocean, Baltic Sea, and Mediterranean agendas were there. So we have inspired from these as well, but because of Black Sea's uniqueness, Black Sea's agenda is quite unique as well. And at the moment, we are in the phase that we develop the implementation plan. Okay, the agenda is there, the priorities are there, but how are we going to make it real? So we are preparing its implementation plan. And while doing so, we are also contributing to many other policy documents at the European scale. And one of the important ones is the Blue Economy Partnership. And in this partnership, all the basins will work together and they will develop their own, they will develop the common strategic research and innovation agenda. And until today, we have contributed to the mission Starfish, which is a mission of the Horizon Europe. We have contributed to the Blue Economy Partnership that I have mentioned, to UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and the EU Blue Economy, Sustainable Development Goals, and the European Green Deal. So we have, our agenda was already quite successful, contributing to these critical documents, which is very, very beneficial for the Black Sea, as you can imagine, so that the Black Sea is visible and the Black Sea is powerful in terms of finding its place in these documents. And another big step is that based on the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the Commission has launched some Horizon 2020 calls, and there are 2 projects, the Bridge Black Sea and the Doors projects, which will start sometime soon. And the start date of Bridge is July 12th, and it will be an online kickoff meeting. So please save this date and please join this meeting, which we will advertise sometime soon. And Bridge will be a critical step towards the implementation of the Syria. And as you see here, it has 3 nodes. The first one is the service dynamics, where we analyze the ecosystem services of the Black Sea, and we also analyze their resilience. And we have the other node, the blue growth incubators, where under this node, we will benefit from the Industry 4.0 technologies, and we will develop new business models, and we will also benefit from smart observations and technologies as well. And the other nodes is on empowering citizens, and where we focus on enhancing science policy dialogue and education and capacity building. There will be even a PhD program under this. And there will be different pilot sites and living labs that we have already defined. And we will have several pilot sites, as you can see, that really covers the whole basin. And we will also work at the basin level. And we will focus on provisioning, regulatory and maintenance, and cultural services in the Black Sea. And we have defined which ecosystem services we will be focusing on at each site, as you can see. And these will be habitat maintenance, for example, food provisioning, water quality, carbon sequestration, fish migration, buffering against anoxia, recreation and tourism. And these were defined in the workshop before we have submitted the project. Okay, going back to the Black Sea Connect, we have already launched 3 joint actions, and one of them is in COVID-19, how COVID-19 impacted the Black Sea ecosystem. The other one is on marine plastics, and the third one is activities of the Black Sea Young Ambassadors. Actually, today they have a program which I have to shift back to right after this meeting. So I will ask for a permission from you, because the 2 events has overlapped. And we have launched the Black Sea Young Ambassadors at the end of October 2020. And the European Commissioner, Maria Gabriel, actually, she has launched this very exciting program. And yes, this event is going on today. So I have the advertisement today, but unfortunately, it's at the same time as our event now. And in a nutshell, this is the Connect Black Sea and our efforts that are ongoing. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, or if there are any questions, I'm sure Professor Mahmut can also answer them, because he is part of the Black Sea Connect project as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Salioglu. Very nice presentation, very synthetic, and we can see now the, let's say, the broadness of this process. And among all, we are talking about sustainability. So sustainability from many different perspectives, but of course we have to, how can I say, to clarify the fundamental aspects of the sustainability. And for this reason, we shall have the next lecture, Professor Enrico Sciuba. He, how can I say, he built up a career that started from Rome, but then passed over the United States and then went back to Rome. And he is worldwide known for his fundamental works and for the guidance for different research groups on aspects related to thermodynamics, applied thermodynamics, and the use of fundamental concepts in thermodynamics in order to, let's say, clarify the issue of sustainability. So this is a very important lecture. It will be more oriented to the basics of this, let's say, scientific let's call it definition of the notion of sustainability. And it will be a very nice opportunity also for us to think and rethink about this issue. So Professor Sciuba, you have the floor. I hope that you can share the screen, and
I will try. Thank you, Eden. Very interesting presentations, both of yours, first of all. Very instructive. I have some comments, but I have more questions than comments. I would like to have the slides. Because
well, by the way, the slides will be available on the website of the event. So in any case, also Professor Salioglu will send us the presentation in PDF format, and we also, so all the slides will be available, and also the record of this courses, of these presentations. So it will be a very nice opportunity, even for those who haven't had time to follow this.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen. There we go. Do you see it?
Yes, that's very nice, yeah.
Okay, so
try to make it now full screen.
Yeah, yeah, I'll make it full screen and I'll begin the show. Here, you go. You see the whole screen?
Yeah, yeah, that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the introduction by Professor Mahmoud, but he's always overstating my qualifications. I'm an applied thermodynamicist, and all I want to do is to link, I'm trying to direct my research in this direction, finding a thermodynamic way of clarifying sustainability issues, because as both speakers before me stated, one thing is to have nice principles, nice words about sustainability, sustainable development, and so on. And another thing is to implement actions or to suggest policymakers to implement actions that solve or can represent a partial solution to the problem. Before I start, let me mention that as Professor Mahmoud well knows, I'm organizing a conference, an international conference in Taormina, in Sicily, for the end of June, beginning of July. ECOS is the 34th series, 34th instantiation of a series of conferences. And we have about 200 papers. Now the collection is completed. And at least 1/3 of them deals with exactly this topic, how to implement solutions towards a more sustainable, or as I like to say, less unsustainable development. Okay, so let's start. A disclaimer first. This is the first lecture of a short course which Professor Mahmoud forced me to teach in Romania. I'm leaving tomorrow in 2 days for Romania. So this is directed to students. And I apologize in advance to Professor Salioglu and Professor Kozoi, because this may look a little too simple for them. But again, this is meant to be the first lecture of a series. I will show it. So let's begin. This is lecture 1, Basic Engineering Cost Analysis Technique. What is the goal of my lectures? You can look at the various lectures, 2, 3, and so on, which will follow in June and probably July. The end is lecture 9. That's the goal, and let's say the real scope of these lectures is to define a new indicator for which we can use to assess both the status quo, the current situation, and the actions that can be done, like comparing different scenarios to proceed toward a less unsustainable development. So this lecture 1 is beginning here. I will talk about energy conversion systems, just a definition, and I will talk about the concept of cost, which is a very important area for which there is absolutely not even a fuzzy understanding among scholars. It may seem trivial, but again, remember that this is a sort of a declaration of intentions, okay? And it's aimed towards students. We have to define energy conversion systems. I tend to use the word conversion. I prefer to use the word conversion because what we are talking about is the link really between first, let's say, primary energy sources and final uses. That's all it's about, okay? How to rationalize the final use of energy and how to make these uses such that they lead to a decrease of the primary exergy consumption, because that is consumed. The resources that we have are not unlimited, the population, unfortunately, is unfortunately, I don't know how to say, it's growing at a pace, unprecedented pace, as Professor Mahmoud showed. And we should be aware also that the pro capita energy, final energy consumption has grown. So the curve of the increase of the population goes hand in hand with another curve of the increase in final uses. And that's what we have to worry about. So what is an energy conversion system? To me, is any combination of course, engineering, but also natural devices and processes that convert some energy influx into an energy outflux of different type or of the same type. And the most general scheme is shown here. We have some materials that go into the process that can be contain potential energy, kinetic energy, thermal energy, chemical potential. These materials go into the process together with some form of energy. We are talking about thermal, mechanical, electrical, and chemical, but there are other forms like radiation, which I consider to be a mechanical form, and nuclear, and this kind of things that we will just ignore for this lecture. The products are all of the products that the process can produce. For a natural process is growth, for instance, or surviving. For an engineering process, a manufactured, or as I call it, an anthropic process, is any form of product, including shape energy. So when you forge a billet into some steel billet into some turbine blade, this needs materials and energy, produces wastes of thermal and or chemical energy in the materials, and the products have some energy which is embodied in the form of shape, for instance. But there are also other products like transportation, education, which are immaterial, and material, just the goods, like agricultural goods, refined ores or refined metals, for instance, or refined construction stones, refined products that we have to take into account. So, first example of energy conversion system, a factory, that's obvious. It gulps some materials and some energy, produces some products, and discharges some waste. This is a conversion system. Okay? Another typical conversion system, this is what all engineers are used to, is, for instance, a gas turbine power plant or a steam power plant, whatever. It uses some fuel, which not only comes from the environment, but is also pre-treated in most cases, like in gas turbines, for instance. It's not natural oil, it's been refined first, or gas. Produces a product which is, in this case, electricity. It may also produce thermal energy, as you will see, and produce some waste. In this case, not only material waste, but also chemical waste, the fumes, and thermal waste, the hot gas. Another thermal system which produces transportation as a product, which is an immaterial kind of product, is road transportation, consumes fuel, provides transportation, let's say commodity, and produces waste. The aircraft is another form of energy system, a conversion system. Marine transportation could be also added. So any kind of service transportation service leads to a use of primary resources as fuel, directly or indirectly, and production of some waste. A steam generator, another engineering type of process, lives on fuel, produces waste, the fumes and the materials which are discharged, ashes and so on, and produces steam, which is a material commodity that is then used downstream in some other processes. But also a heat exchanger is an energy conversion because it converts thermal energy into a different form of thermal energy. It does it by using as a fuel a hot fluid which has been made hot by consuming some natural resources and produces heat at the desired specification, which is a final product. And in doing this, produces also waste which is usually thermal waste. Okay? But I would like to enlarge, expand the area of definition of energy conversion system. A bacterial colony is an energy conversion system in our approach. It consumes primary energy, chemical or thermal, and usually both. It consumes some form of matter as let's say, food for the bacterial colony. And the outcome is definitely immaterial because it is survival. It means survival of this bacterial colony. This is also an energy conversion system. And a forest functions in just the same way. It absorbs matter and energy from the environment, produces some waste, and its goal is to survive. So this is another form of extended, let's say, conversion system, energy conversion system. We can go one step further. The predator and prey system in nature is an energy conversion system. The lynx here is going to eat that hare. The hare and the lynx are both aiming to attain survival. That's their product. They produce some waste in doing this, probably the hare in this slide, and they consume energy, metabolic energy in this case, that they absorb from the environment, and matter, in this case, the hare. Okay. There is another form of, in nature, of cooperation between different species. That is a symbiotic system. There are many examples of symbiotic systems. I chose the shark and the remora. Okay, the remora lives by consuming the discard material from the shark. So there is a matter consumption on the side of both species. They cooperate in this. They use energy, and both of the species are doing what they're doing to survive. So survival is a product here. And it should be very clear what is the next step. Our, what we call Mother Earth, but we are not treating it like a mother, really. We are treating it like an estranged father more than that. The Earth survives on solar radiation from space. Okay? I don't want to elaborate. Not only solar radiation, but there is also another other types of radiation that come from the space, cosmic rays, for instance, and supports life, which is the product of planet Earth, and emits a waste which is globally in the form of low temperature radiation. And this balance of the system is what assures our survival as a species. And we should not be too much centered on the survival of the species, because this is really egoistic. Life is composed of many species beside us. And it's rather clear that even after the humans will disappear, or before they appeared, the Earth was producing life and will be producing life for billions of years. So it is an energy conversion system. Now, before we move to the cost definition, because what I want to do is to quantify the energy, fundamentally the primary energy used by these energy conversion systems. And we also always say that there is a cost in any action. Now, I took some textbook definitions. Cost in economic terms, in modern economic terms, is the money that you pay to acquire or to produce a commodity. Commodity, I use commodity to indicate both material goods and services, like transportation, or in the case of life, survival. I like to extend this definition and say that we can use this term to indicate a very physical concept of cost, the amount of resources needed to produce the commodity. Forget money for a second. It would be good to consider cost the amount of energy that we use to generate the final electricity, as Professor Mahmoud showed. If I recall correctly, the final energy was like 9.5% or 10% of the initial natural resources. This is really more interesting to me than saying that electricity costs 5 cents to the kilowatt hour, because the kilowatt hour is an energy unit, and the amount of energy that went into that producing that commodity is 10 times as large. And this should give us should require some attention. In thermodynamics, we do not use price. Price is an economic concept that is a cost plus the profit of the seller. I am not naive. I know that we live in a society where money is used as a proxy for everything. But when we deal with thermodynamics, we should forget the idea of price and actually use another concept, the value. The concept of value is well defined in economics, is the usefulness of a commodity, both for the producer or the buyer, purchaser, or the owner. There are several types of value. One is the use value, which is the present value, the value now, for a user who uses that product. I buy a car, and the use, for me, the use value of this car is transportation. There is another type of value, the exchange value. How do I pay for the car? I can give back my old car. It's a commodity against another commodity. And I can use money, which is a proxy, to give it to the seller in exchange for the car. I can rent it and again use a proxy to cover the exchange value of the car. This value, as a matter of fact, has been extended. The exchange value can become a substitution value, which I like to call proxy, which is the value of a commodity expressed in units of a conventional reference commodity, which today is typically money, but it was not necessarily so in the whole history of humankind, and it's not the one we are after here in these projects about sustainability. When we deal with any process, we want to run what we call the economic feasibility, which is a normalized form of benefit-cost ratio. Okay, we know that the process is convenient if the user value of the product is higher than the user value of the fuels. Typical example is exactly the electricity. The amount of a kilowatt hour, 1 kilowatt hour, that I use to, for instance, to run my applications in the apartment where I live, is higher to me than the equivalent amount, 10 times as much, of raw oil that I wouldn't know what to do with if I had to light a lamp or heat or cool my home. So in this case, it's convenient to use electricity. I'm not talking about heating. Let's talk about appliances, okay? It's more convenient for me. The use value of the lighting, for instance, of my apartment is higher than the use value to me of the oil or coal or radiation, if we're using, or wind or whatever source I am using indirectly to get my products, okay? So the electricity for me is economically feasible. The process of transformation in electricity is economically feasible because of the user value ratio between product and fuel is higher than 1. Notice that I call fuel, I'm using Zaccarone's definition. Fuel is anything I use as an input to a process to generate the product which I want. Now we can move to a systemic definition. That is, I want to define the concept of cost with reference to whatever process, okay? Natural or anthropic, artificial. First of all, I have to identify the fuels, all of the fuels that go into the process. Then I have to identify the products which I want, like, for instance, electricity. There may be some byproducts in the process, let's say heat in the conversion, and I can call them byproducts if I reuse them. If I don't use them, like the fumes that go out of the stack gases, the stack emissions, they are pure discharges, okay? So now we can define cost as a ratio between fuel and product. And I'm not talking about any unit here. I'm not talking about fuels expressed in kilojoules and products in kilojoules, or fuels expressed in money or whatever form of proxy and products. I'm talking about the general definition. Now, which means that I have to know how each fuel contributes to the formation of the product. So I have to know the structure of the process, but I also have to know the structure of the fuels. There are 3 arrows as an input here. One may be an energy flow, okay? Suppose I use electricity. I need to know, to compute the cost-benefit ratio, I need to know how I produce this secondary electricity. The second arrow may be materials. Materials that are usually pre-treated. I need to know the structure of the process upstream of the one I'm examining here that led from the natural ores to the final or pre-treated materials that I'm using in the process. Oil, for instance, is not used in the process of generating electricity as is, but it is transported, refined, filtered, and so on and so on. The third arrow might be, for instance, labor. But labor is created by the society. So how much energy, primary energy, do I use to generate that labor? That is also a cost for my process. And the discharges, I have to know the structure of the process to identify the discharges. There are several possible choices to measure fuels, products, and discharges. There are several choices. The first one is to use physical units. And I'm giving an example which I found on internet the data for. Suppose that I use physical units and want to say, I want to compute how high is the cost of 1 kilogram of wheat produced in the agriculture. An average estimate is that I use 12.5 kilograms of seeds and 15 kilograms of water. I'm using mass units for both the products and the fuels. That's a possibility. That's a physical cost, a cost expressed in physical units. I can use, though, physical units of immaterial type, joules, kilowatt hours, or work hours. An example is that to obtain the same kilogram of wheat, an average estimate is I have to use 9.3 megajoules of energy, primary energy, and 0.065 work hours for 1 kilogram of wheat. These are both immaterial units, but they are still physical units. In today's world, we use proxy units, monetary usually, to express the value for us of both material and immaterial flows. Like, to obtain 1 kilogram of wheat, it costs me 0.03 euros. It costs the producer 0.03 euros. But remember that in previous society, in previous times, and also in some societies today, we use another type of proxy unit. In Africa, for instance, I have been there and I witnessed it myself. 1 ton of wheat is equivalent to 1/10 of a cow. Okay, so if you give somebody 1 cow, he gives you 10 tons of wheat. Or you can pay with gold. 1 ton of wheat is equal to 0.2 ounces of gold. So these are all proxy units. The fact that today we tend to use money is only because of convenience. It's not rooted in any philosophical background. We use money because it's easier, and it's easier to convert lei into dollars than to convert cows into wheat. Okay, so, but we can use any kind of proxy that we want. The first method, the physical unit in kilograms of water and kilograms of seeds per kilogram of wheat, for instance, was used in the past and still sometimes used in non-industrialized agricultural context. This method is, though, for our concern in today's times, is not closed, it's not useful, it's because it's not closed. How do I measure the cost of seeds and water? I have to go back and see how I obtained this water. I extracted, I pumped it, the water came from somewhere else. And how do I produce the seeds? For sure, I had to select them or to breed them. So I spent additional raw resources, primary resources, to generate these fuels. So this method is difficult to apply because it's difficult to reconstruct, or complicated to reconstruct the real costs of both fuels, seeds and water. The second method, it's physical and uses immaterial type measures, like 1 kilogram of wheat requires the use of an investment of 9.3 megajoules of energy and 0.065 work hours. The problem is then again that I have in this case two fuels. One is energy measured in kilowatt hours, and the other is work hours measured in work hours. So how many joules you need to generate a work hour? Otherwise, the cost is not expressed in uniform homogeneous units. You cannot add F1 to F2 unless you have a way to quantify work hours in terms of energy, or vice versa, energy flow kilowatt hours in terms of work hours. So this is also a difficult method to use. The most used today is the monetary one, okay? I need so and so many euros, 3 cents, to produce 1 kilogram of wheat. And this is convenient because I can include in F, now we have only one fuel, the monetary investment, so to say, into wheat production. And I can include the work hours. They cost me so and so much. 0.065 work hours are whatever, $1, €1, whatever, equivalent from country to country, varies. The water has a cost in monetary proxy. The land use has a cost, and so on. But also the product is now measured in monetary units. So if I use the wheat to produce bread, I can simply add to the cost, monetary cost of bread formation, the cost of the wheat, which is now a fuel for the bread production. So this is a very convenient way of doing it. Okay, that's why we use it today with monetary units. But remember that the method does not require necessarily the use of money, just requires the use of a proxy. And a kilogram of gold can be a proxy, or silver. And these are still used today. Carats of diamonds, they are still used today. Okay, I can pay for something with diamonds if I had diamonds. In the past, there are examples of proxies based on kilograms of salt or obsidian arrow points. There is a very interesting story about the Mayas. The Mayas of the mountains had no salt, but they had obsidian. So they constructed arrow points. We are talking about 1,000 something years ago. The Mayas of the coast in South America, they had salt, but no obsidian. So there was a complicated economic exchange, which led to an assignment of value to the kilogram of salt and the kilogram and the number of obsidian arrow points. So there was a different proxy that was used on an equivalence basis. Another method of proxy could be the hectares of land. Okay? Or, like they do in most countries in Central Africa, the number of goats, oxes, and horses. They do that also in Mongolia. They do it sometimes in South America. And they did it in Italy until 50 years ago. Okay. And of course, a number of slaves, but that today is no longer used. So I'm stating this here just to say that the proxy does not need necessarily to be money. It can be anything. In particular, as I will argue in the rest of the lectures, we can use a thermodynamic measure. Now, there are several costing methods, okay? They are paradigms, as a matter of fact, more than methods. I decide to use a certain proxy, and then I establish procedures that guarantee that this proxy method is valid, is as universal as it's possible, and it's accepted by the buyer and the seller. We have to classify these methods. What is the attribute of the product that we are evaluating? Are we evaluating the kilograms? Are we evaluating the energy content? Are we evaluating the number of pieces? What is the costing basis? Physical or immaterial? What is the costing unit? Is it money, seashells, goats, cows, or kilowatt hours? And on this basis, we can draw the following table. I have listed here 5 methods, which I will describe in my subsequent lectures. Energy analysis, techno-economics, which is the usual engineering economics we're using today, thermoeconomics, which is an interesting method which was proposed in the 60s, exchange analysis, and extended exchange accounting. Now, these methods all have a different, can use a different costing basis. Energy analysis uses energy, prices the energy content of the product and of the fuels. Engineering economics uses a monetary basis to account for the cost of energy and materials. Thermoeconomics uses a monetary basis to account for, to measure the exchange content of materials and energy. Exchange analysis uses a physical economic basis, the kilojoule, to measure the exchange of products and fuels. And finally, extended exchange analysis, accounting, uses a physical basis, the kilojoule, to measure the primary exchange consumption that goes into the production. And on the right, you have 2 columns. The costs expressed in light blue are dimensionless. And there are only 3 methods which lead to dimensionless cost formulation. The other ones, techno-economics and thermoeconomics, measure euro per kilojoule or per kilogram in thermoeconomics, and euro per kilojoule in thermoeconomics. Only that in thermoeconomics, the kilojoule is the kilojoule of exergy. Another lecture, I will explain what exergy is, but our colleagues here know very well what exergy is. And in the last column, I show that these methods date back to at least 50 years or 60 years, okay? They were all in use well before I compiled this slide, okay? Now, energy analysis. Let's start from energy analysis. Cost is physical, so it's kilojoule or kilowatt hours. Of course, if you measure flows, that goes in kilowatts, kilojoules per second or kilowatt hours per year or whatever. The cost is calculated, though, on the basis of the unit energy content of each stream. That means that when you have materials, you account for the enthalpic value. And in this process I'm sketching here, the material flow is measured in kilowatts because it's kilojoules per kilogram of material multiplied by the kilograms per second that go into the process. But then all the other items must be also measured in the same units because the cost is dimensionless. The energy flow is measured in kilojoules per second or kilowatts. The products are measured at the enthalpic value, kilowatts, because it's a flow. Similarly for the waste. The cost is always larger than 1, of course, which is good because it's necessary. If we have a process with a cost lower than 1, we have made mistakes, as I always say to my doctoral students who are investigating this type of processes, this type of paradigms. Techno-economics, engineering economics. This is what we study and what we teach to our students in engineering and in economics and in other branches. This is the most common method today. Costing is physical. So we price either the kilogram of wheat or the kilojoule of electricity or the piece of product, okay? The number of units of television sets, for instance, or computers. The cost is calculated for the unit of energy content of each item produced, but also for the unit of energy content of the materials and energy used. And these costs are always in euros per second, or euros per year, per hour. However, it's a measure, a monetary measure that measures the flux of capital that goes into the process to generate 1 monetary unit of product. The cost benefit here is very clear. It's a cost of the fuels divided by the cost of the products. Thermoeconomics. This is an interesting method that now it's very well developed. And it's similar to the energy accounting, but is based on the unit of exergy, which is a thermodynamic measure of the actual energy content of physical streams. So the cost in thermoeconomics is euros per second, which are obtained by multiplying the euros per kilojoule by the kilojoules per second, but the kilojoules per second are of exergy, not enthalpy now. And the two values can be very different. For instance, for hot water, the exergy value is a fraction of the energy enthalpic value of the water. For a fuel, the exergy value is different from its enthalpy value. And also the other flows, energy is measured in exergy kilojoules, where we can anticipate that an exergy kilojoule of electricity is equal to the energy kilojoule, like an exergy kilojoule of mechanical work is equal to its energy kilojoule. But for instance, a flow of chemical energy has an exergy content which is different from its energy content, enthalpic value or chemical energy. And the thermal energy content, any quantity of what we call heat, okay, the thermal energy flow has an exergy content which is much lower than its enthalpic value. And the same applies to products. Thermoeconomics, after 30 years of continuous fighting, has been now adopted by most academicians and by the major industries. Even car producers or power plants producers generate thermoeconomic analysis of their products or their production lines. Okay, so it's a very popular method. And if you look at the journal publications, every journal on energy, like energies, applied energy, environmental science, and so on, in any number, you will find 1 or 2 papers written on thermoeconomic analysis. There is another different method, very similar to thermoeconomics, was originated by Chargot in the 60s and the 70s. It's called the thermoecological cost. This thermoecological cost is now embodied into what is called the exergy analysis of the Valero group in Zaragoza. But it's basically the same as it was originated by Chargot in the 70s, I would say. The costing basis is physical, again, kilojoules. the cost is calculated again for the unit of exergy content of each stream. But there is a novelty here. The environmental cost is included. That's why thermoecological cost in the name. Chargot, who was the original proposer of this method, introduced a way of computing the environmental cost. Now, we can discuss whether we like or not the way he defined the thermoecological cost, but definitely it's a way of linking or including an externality, which is environmental cost, into the cost of the products. Okay. And the cost is expressed by an index, which is called the CEXC, cumulative exergy content. And it's always larger than 1, of course, and it measures the amount of raw exergy that goes into the production of 1 kilojoule of exergy in the products. Again, all units are in exergy. Then there is this exergy analysis, which is even older than it predates thermoeconomics, and it was originated in the East Germany and Russia in the 50s and 60s. Well, not only East Germany, in the East Bloc, let's say, because one of the guys was Wozniakowicz, who was originally Serbian. Chargot had to do with it, he was Polish. Brodiansky in Russia was one of the initiators. Fratscher and Elsner in Germany, Rand in what was then East Germany, were the originators of this method. But the method became really popular in the States in the 70s. This method uses the same approach as the energy analysis, but replaces the value estimate, applying it to the exergy and not to the enthalpy of the material, energy, and products flow. There is no monetary implication here. The costs are in kilowatts or kilojoules per kilogram. And the externalities, which are labor, capital, and remediation costs, are not included. Exergy is a very good, very satisfactory thermodynamic approach to the problem, but it leaves out the so-called externalities. Capital cost, because to build the process, I need to spend some money. Labor cost, which because I need workers to work on the process. And environmental remediation, because I had to intervene on the waste streams to reduce the emission level. The extended exergy accounting is a method that I proposed in 1998 or something like this, 1999. By the way, at a seminar in Poland where Chargot was present, and we had a lot of discussions with Professor Chargot at that time, and even after that, the cost in BASIC is still physical. It is an exergy analysis, basically, but it includes externalities, labor, capital, and environmental damage. So it contains a procedure to express labor, capital, and environmental remediation in terms of a proxy, which is exergy. So how much exergy is equivalent to 1 work hour? How much exergy is equivalent to €1 or 1 monetary unit? How much exergy, primary exergy, is equivalent to repair some environmental damage? This is the novelty of extended exergy accounting. The cost is dimensionless because it's in kilojoules of primary exergy over the kilojoules of exergy in the product, and the cost is always much, much larger than 1, as it's expected. Okay? Now, let's try to see the products and fuels of some common energy conversion systems, because there is there are some very important statements to make here. Gas turbine power plant. There are 2 fuels. The real fuel, what we call fuel, the gas or the oil or the methane or whatever, in point 2, in the combustion chambers. But there is also air that goes into the combustion. So we have to consider air as a fuel. The fact that we don't pay for air is what makes it negligible in all cost accounting techniques. But from a thermodynamic point of view, it is important to consider it as a fuel, because if you think of it, there is always a pre-treatment of the air, almost always a pre-treatment of the air that goes into a gas turbine, for instance, power plant. The product here is, in this particular process I'm sketching here, is obviously the electrical power P, state 3, section 3 of the plant. And the discharges are of two types. The fuels, the gases at the stack, section 4, and the hot water that goes out from the intercooler of the compressor. Okay, so we have two discharges, two fuels, and one product. If we have a combined power plant, gas turbine, steam turbine, we still have two fuels, air and the physical fuel, what we call fuel really in normal life, in the terms, the gas, gasoline, gas, whatever. These fuels generate one product, which is the final product, electricity, stream 3, and two discharges again, one at the condenser of the steam turbine and one at the chimney. Notice that the previous discharge from a gas turbine, which was the hot gas, is now an internal flow, because the hot gas from the gas turbine goes to heat up the steam in the generator. So we recover almost completely the discharge energy or exergy of the gas turbine. A GT cogeneration plant is simpler. It just produces steam instead of electricity in the steam power plant. It's simpler, but it has still two fuels, air in the compressor and the fuel, like methane or whatever. It generates electricity from the gas turbine unit, and the discharge of the gas turbine goes into a heat recovery boiler, which produces the other product, steam for process, stream 4. And there is one discharge, stack gas. If you have an intercooler, you will also have some other discharge from the gas turbine unit. And this is interesting, a solar thermal plant. Okay? This is an item that we like to discuss because it's what we want to build as a renewable source for heating in all our buildings. Well, what is the fuel? There are two fuels. One is the one we don't pay for, and that's the solar irradiation, flow 1. The other one is the electricity that we need to pump the glycol or whatever fluid we use through the system. That's a small consumption, but it is a consumption. We have to account for it. Two fuels, 1 and 2. There is one product, of course, heat that goes into the final use, so to heat the excuse me, to heat the building. And there is a discharge, which is thermal energy at low temperature being re-irradiated by the solar panel. So this is a sketch that we have to use when you run a mass and energy balance of this plant. Mass balance is easy because this thing is closed. So, but the energy balance must take into account the discharge number 4. A photovoltaic plant is really interesting because it shows us that the product fuel definition must be applied with care. During the day, there is one fuel, which is number 1, solar irradiation, that goes into the generation of electricity, and there are two products. One is the electricity that goes to the net, and the second one is the electricity, part of the generated electricity that goes to replenish the battery. So there are two products, number 2 and number 3, during the day, the insolation time. Now, at night, though, the solar panel is excluded because F1 doesn't exist anymore. And the battery provides electricity to the grid or to the user. So the fuel at night is stream number 4. And the product 3 at night does not exist, as it doesn't exist the fuel number 1. During the night, the discharge number 5 does not exist. And there are only some thermal discharges from the battery that I did not include in this definition. So you see that the same system in different operating modes can have a different flow product structure. Now let's go to the natural systems. And this is, I chose the cycle of water, okay? And I'm glad to do that. I did that because of the discussion that we had on the Black Sea. The cycle of water can be described in the very simple way that I chose here, but there are other ways to describe it. The main fuel is irradiation. Irradiation leads to evaporation of soil water, to transpiration from forests, and generates a runoff, okay, D1, that goes into natural reservoirs. There is a secondary, there is a backscatter, which is the discharge number 1, and number 2, which I forgot to indicate. But there is another cycle, which is the condensation precipitation subcycle, where the fuel is the water from the rains, and the product is the evaporation from the sea, which are recovering the runoff from the first cycle, F1P1. Now, this is an elementary description. Other descriptions are possible because you can re-describe the process as being fed only by F1. It needs a little recombination of the block scheme of the process. So also natural processes like this, the same description, for instance, applies to ocean currents, which are fed mainly by solar energy and also indirectly by solar energy by the wind circulation, or applies to the atmospheric circulation, which is fed by thermal differences brought by the irradiation of the sun and the rotation of the earth. So there are different ways of describing these natural systems, but the scheme still, the product fuel scheme can be applied to all of these processes. Production factors. Now, let's consider only anthropic processes, human-made, okay? When we run a cost analysis, we deal with the concept of production cost. Now, to generate a production cost, we need to know how much money we invest in the equipment. We have to buy it and operate it. How many work hours we have, labor costs, salaries and wages. How much money do we need to spend in operational maintenance, refurbishing, make up fluids and stuff like that. And how much money we spend in, or energy we spend in effluent treatment to reduce or avoid environmental damage. Now, the items A, B, and D are what I called before externalities. This is a common economic and engineering expression. So we have a parameter, a process, which has several parameters. One is size, of course, and one are the thermodynamic parameters, process parameters, temperatures, pressures, mass flow rates, and so on and so on. The process is fed by materials and energy, 2 fuels in this case, has only one process, one product. I just assume that the product is only one, but there are 2 additional fuels, capital and labor. And there is another fuel that is an indirect cost brought by the effluent treatment, because the discharge is treated using F5 treatment costs to produce what we call clean discharges. Let's assume that I can reduce the pollution to 0 in this case. It's not possible, but we will assume that. Now, this is a general scheme to compute the production cost. Notice that in engineering economics, A is called the CapEx, capital expenditures. And the sum B plus C is called OPEX, operational expenditures. Okay, so there's a link between this representation and the user representation that economists or budget engineers give to this production cost. Now, what happens though is that in economics, economists have defined decades ago, actually centuries ago, 5 production factors. Actually 4. The 5th one, environmental production factor, was introduced only recently after the 70s. What are these production factors? These production factors are a quantification of the value, use value, or proxy value of the inputs. Capital production factor is the product of the capital flow times the unit cost of capital, because nobody gives you money for free. You have to borrow it from the bank. Okay, so there is a cost, which in this case is the interest rate. And FK is one of the economic parameters of a financing, for instance. And the capital production factor is F of K times the capital flow in euros per second. Material production factor, the unit cost, either in energy or in money, of the materials that go into this process. The energy production factor, same thing, the cost of the energy multiplied by the enthalpic value of the streams that are going to the fuels and the product. We can replace it by exergy, but this is not necessary here, just to clarify the concept. Then there is a labor production factor that is measured in work hours or in euro per work hours. And only recently, an environmental production factor, capital O, from the Greek oikos, I chose this name. Actually, I didn't choose it. It was Professor Frangopoulos who proposed it in the 90s. Professor Frangopoulos of the National Technical University of Athens. And this is given by some factor which represents the cost to clean the effluent J, multiplied by the mass flow rate of the effluent J, in this case P. I'm sorry, I mixed up the suffixes. So these production factors, all 5, you can find them in every economic analysis run by engineers and policymakers today. This is the way they like to express the production cost of an item or of a commodity. Now it turns out that you have to combine these production factors to obtain the cost of the product. So there is some function phi which operates. There's a mistake in the slide 36. Instead of F in the formula at the bottom, you should put phi, capital phi. The operands of this production function are the production factors: capital, C, material, M, energy, E, labor, L, environmental remediation, O. So there is a combination. It's not a linear sum. It's a combination of these factors. That's why phi is generally a matrix that operates on the production factors, individual production factors, and to generate the cost of the product. This operation is not simple, but it's completely regulated. In other words, as our colleagues in the academia and in the engineering communities well know, you cannot run a production cost analysis the way you want. There are formats that you have to use and procedures that you have to use to compute the production factors individually and then to combine them into the function phi to obtain the production cost. Now, for what we are concerned, we can express these production cost calculation in a more formal way. There is a matrix phi, which operates on the cost factors, the production factor C of the inputs, to obtain the vector of the costs of the products, capital C of the products. this function phi, it's true that it depends on the production factors, but it depends on the type of process, because every individual process has, it can be described by a set of, for instance, parameters, thermodynamic parameters, pressure, temperatures, mass flow rates, compositions. Material properties, it's different if I'm using glycol and water or a molten potassium and magnesium salt in a steam plant. So material properties are influencing the production cost. And the hardware design variables, DI, are actually the size. They describe the size and the ratios of the size in a hardware. This is a set of numbers that I give to the factory at the design phase and tells them how to build this thing. And of course, the cost varies, the production cost varies for a turbine which is 20 centimeters in diameter or 1.5 meters in diameter. And then there is also another item which is very complicated to calculate, the allocation vector or allocation criteria. Very simple description is, in this case, we have two products, okay? How do we allocate the cost of the boiler? No, let's say a combustor in a gas turbine. How do I allocate the cost of the combustor to the electricity and to the hot gas, which is a byproduct? There are rules to do this. And these rules depend on the different components. Okay? For a gas turbine, for a combustor, for a compressor, for the feed water heaters of a steam process, the allocation criteria are a set of criteria which are not very well agreed upon, but which need to be defined before you run the production cost. And you have to specify these criteria to justify your allocation. Example, gas compressor. There are two fuels, power to move the compressor and air that gets in. There is only one product in this simple representation, which is a compressed air at P2, T2. But there is a rejection of heat because of the irreversibilities in the process, and there is some heat. I wrote heat, but I should really always refer to it as thermal energy flow. That is discharge. So the scheme representation, the block representation of this process is one product, F1 and F2 are the inputs, but the compressor is described by the pressure and temperature at the inlet, pressure and temperature at the outlet, the material pi properties, in this case is air, I need the air properties, D, the size of the compressor, number of stages, type of material used in the blades, the diameter of the compressor, diameter of the shaft, the number of bearings, this kind of things. And in this case, the allocation, thank God, is negligible because we have only one product. Okay? If we had a different not compressor, a different, for instance, an intercooled compressor, then I would have to allocate between the bodies of the compressor before the intercooling and after the intercooling. And I would also have another discharge at the intercooling. Now, more recently, and I'm talking about the extended exergy accounting, has been shown that all of these paradigms can be superseded by a physical costing paradigm, the extended exergy, that includes energy costs, material costs, environmental costs related to production factors, and of course, the externalities. Okay, the measure is exergy, and this is no problem. And the allocation is made under the same principles stated in engineering economics or thermoeconomics, but the method is more inclusive, and this is the one which I will explain at the end of the course in lecture 9. And this is the topic that leads to an environmental indicator that we want to use in the project that we are developing with Professor Mahmoud at Costanza, and want to introduce this indicator as a general indicator and suggest we use it in all our sustainability or degree of unsustainability assessment. Thank you very much. I don't think I did. No, I didn't go over time. And thank you very much. And I'm ready for questions and answers. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor Shuba. A very nice, clear, how can I say, very transparent in some sense, breathable.
Somewhat trivial, let's say, somewhat trivial. Okay, very elementary.
The aspects that look trivial, because then I am coming to questions. So we have Dr. Leonid Boshkov, if you look into...
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at
you something that might look very trivial. So what is definition of life in terms of energy or thermodynamics?
Okay, that's a very nice question, Dr. Boshkov. Boshkov, how do you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Boshkov. It's a very interesting question. I'm sure that you have read Schrödinger booklet, What is Life? Okay, all of us have. Now, the answer is not so simple, but for our thermodynamic approach is somewhat, let me say, trivial. Okay, what is life? I start with another consideration. How do we proceed from elementary chemical components in the Earth crust and the oceans to more complex components, like how does sulfur combine with water to become sulfuric acid? How does nitrogen combine with water to give nitrogen oxide in the atmosphere? These are reactions, chemical reactions, that are produced. They are actually not only forced, but they are maintained by solar radiation, generally by thermal actions produced by solar radiation. Now, if you go, and I'm following Prigogine in this, if you go towards more and more complex chemical reactions, you attain a level in which very complex molecules of amino acids were present in the original, let's say, oceans, okay, which were sort of a very denser than today, less salty than today, pools of complex chains of amino acids. Some natural process, some say a thunder or an electrical discharge or some nuclear reaction of an asteroid, extreme heat or something like that, gave these amino acids so much energy that they could make an evolutionary jump. They learned, it's an ugly word, they learned how to reproduce themselves. And this is accepted as the step which separates organic chemistry from life. Now, I'm not a religious person, I have to say this, okay? And I believe in this definition. And then life went on through an evolutionary process. From a thermodynamic point of view, today, I define as a living organism a system, a very complex system, which survives on material and energy inputs from the outside, produces survival as a commodity. That's the goal of the existence of a biological system, and discharges some material. So I can treat it as a ordinary, let's say, though very complex, thermodynamic system. I hope that satisfied your question. This is an earthy issue, life, but I'm addressing it from a purely thermodynamic point of view.
For sure, this is a topic for a series of courses. And I'm sure that this is something where some aspects related to the role of information, energy, and matter have to be considered into this complexity. But for the time being, let's keep the answer that was given by Professor Shuba like that, just for opening some others. Now, allow me to introduce Professor Kossoy. Maybe he would like to say a few words also.
No. Thank you, Eden. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I want to send my greetings from Odessa, Ukraine. It is north part of the Black Sea here, but there is a joke, better to stay at the north part of the Black Sea than at the south part of the North Sea. So we are all here in the Black Sea, and I'd like to express my gratitude for your great presentations, for you, Professor Mahmoud, and for you, Professor Shuba. Actually, the problem of the sustainability is really important, not only for our region, but it's a problem of the whole community, all people around the world. And I just give you one example. I was lucky to stay in Japan for a long time, and one of the projects I participated was connected with the problem of Fukushima station. It was maybe 1 year right after the disaster in Fukushima. And you just mentioned in the presentation about the fishery, but you would understand that for Japan, fishery is a very important branch of the economy. Because seafood, because fish, very good quality and very popular in this country. But the problem with Fukushima station is that rainwaters from mountains go under the Fukushima station, got the radiation, and brought this radiation water to the ocean. So how we can stay without nuclear power plants in the world? I believe it's impossible, because all renewables are very good. But for industry, for the economy of the big countries, civilized countries, nuclear power plants stay alive. So this problem will bring us additional challenges from the point of view of sustainability and how we can combine renewable resources and traditional resources, energy power resources we use. So I'm happy to say that at this master course, I have two my master students from the Technical University of Berlin. Both of them are here, and both of them are doing good research from the point of view of renewable energy development for specific cases for Germany, for India. And from this point of view, I just to say that the course and your presentations are really important for our master students and for our young researchers. So just one thing I'd like to wish you to go ahead and to have more such quality courses ahead. And we are always open and ready to support you this way. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kossoy. And thank you for all what you are doing in Odessa by, let's say, leading this institute, which has connectivity to two basic aspects, food and energy. So
sure.
These are elements where, of course, aspects of sustainability are fundamental. And as you mentioned, we have to introduce into this equation also the concept of security. just in order to have them into an appropriate matrix. I would like to come back now to Enrico. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit, because you mentioned about these, let's call it proxies that you meant regarding the value. So how you interpret the blockchain cryptocurrencies? Because in most of the cases, when the people were talking about Bitcoin, you know, it came into the public debate, the aspect of energy consumption for cryptocurrencies and the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies. So is a Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency a proxy in the sense that you meant as, let's say, something of value of exchange, or it have to be considered from a different perspective?
It's a difficult, well, the answer is not difficult, but the answer is my personal opinion about these things, because there are no studies about Bitcoins or crypto monies, currencies. I'll give you my idea, okay? My personal opinion. I think all these cryptocurrencies are a fraud from the, let's say, the economic point of view. The problem I see is that if I have to assign a value, let's say, to the Bitcoin, okay, I would assign the equivalent primary energy that these jerks are using to mine a Bitcoin. And there is a problem in China right now. In the last few days, the government made it more difficult to mine Bitcoins by consuming energy. I shouldn't say consuming energy, by using final energy, which could be used for different goals. But the problem of a proxy is still there with the current money, let's say. So this said, I don't think that Bitcoin is a real currency. I think that its value, how much it's overstated, should be calculated on the basis of the primary resources they are consuming through the production chain of electricity to get a Bitcoin. And the question can be expanded, let's say. How much value do you attach to $1 or €1, one monetary unit? And this is what extended exergy tries to do. That was my push towards developing this theory. The piece of paper that is $1 or whatever currency has no intrinsic value because it's just a printed piece of paper, okay? Its production cost is negligible, so to say. Paper, some ink, and some electronics to produce it. But the amount, the collective amount of money that is circulating in a country, what is it equivalent to? In my opinion, it is equivalent to a portion of the primary exergy consumption that the country is feeding on. This is my opinion. Okay. Well, for the exergy, extended exergy is not only an opinion. I had developed a theory. So I would completely separate Bitcoins and crypto currencies from the real established currencies, because the real established currencies have a background in the economics, in the energy economics of the country. Bitcoin doesn't. I hope this is clear, okay? This is
well, let's hope it is clear, because in some of the approaches, you know that the total amount of banknotes are just depending on the capacity of printing them.
I'm in Italy, don't tell me that, you know?
But let us keep the things at this range, and let us hope that the next course that you will have will put much more, let's say, emphasis on the aspects that we have to build on this engineering approach to sustainability.
Definitely. As a matter of fact, it's a good idea. We could write a paper about XRG and Bitcoins. What do you think? Huh? The group could produce a statement. I think would be the first paper published in this topic.
And we can prepare that paper using the, let's say, blockchain approach, where each of these participants, they could add their own opinion, and then we could summarize that.
Let's do this. Let's do this. So we give an immediate follow-up to this. I will write a summary and a short abstract and send it to, I'll bring it with me. I'll send it to you before I come to Costanza, okay?
Okay.
That's a good idea. What do you think, Professor Kosoi?
And I support, I also ready to join you in this work. But also, I suggest to invite Elon Musk for this.
Yes, we will.
Okay. So I see here a final point from the part of Dr. Boshkov. And here I think that you could also establish a direct chain, a direct channel for communication with him. We could provide you his email address and
sure.
you can write to him directly about the idea of sustainability from the perspective of philosophy,
right,
and from aspects that are like that. Of course, thermodynamics is a very beautiful idea, a very beautiful sphere of knowledge, but is not offering the answers to everything. So we have to take into consideration that thermodynamics, like all the other sciences, is a construct, is built based on knowledge, based on some principles, based on a set of hypotheses, and then is a construct that is evolving. So from that perspective, it is important for all of us to contribute to this construct, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. But just a few words. Sustainability, Dr. Boshkov, I don't think it's a philosophy. Sustainability is a fuzzy definition as of today. What we are trying to do is to give this concept a physical basis, because otherwise, and this is the reason for my work in this area, otherwise, saying simply that we will leave to our next generations the same amount of capital and natural goods as we had forever, it's saying nothing. Because I don't know what my kids, I already don't know what my kids want now. So how can I know what my great-great-grandchildren will know or will need? And how do we know what the state of the planet will be in 200 years? Look what happened in the last 100. So I wouldn't see it as a philosophical matter, but as a very urgent action on the part of us thermodynamicists to provide support to policymakers to do something to avoid the deterioration of our environment to an extent that can endanger not only our survival as a species, but the survival of the chain of life on Earth, okay? So we don't want to become like Mars very soon. We want to wait, okay?
Okay, let's hope that these aspects will be more and more clear. We heard a few months ago when it was announced globally, worldwide on the news, that the quantity of total artifacts So that means everything that is man-made or due to man is higher than the total artifacts that is made by nature. So a few months ago, it was announced that based on some models and estimations, at the moment we could say that in our, let's say, sphere, the structuring of the matter due to anthropogenic influence is higher than the natural influence, or the matter that is structured due to the natural influence. So from that perspective, now really the humans are in a very difficult situation. They have to take a major responsibility for the survival of all these value chains. So from that perspective, reconsidering, rethinking, rejudging on these basic aspects is fundamental.
It is indeed, Eden, but I would like to add a remark. Since the Earth is, from the mass point of view, a closed system, we are building our structures, destroying or extracting, let's say, the same amount of mass from the Earth. So the total mass remains the same. We are just changing the structure of the planet. And this is the problem.
Yeah.
So it's a very tricky issue.
Yeah,
You're right.
it's a very important aspect. Thank you for pointing on that. 1 year ago, I been involved in a project, and we were looking at the impact of mining sector. And when I've been in Chile, in South America, we visited several sites where men, I mean multinational corporations, they took a mountain and shifted from one place to another just for digging for different types of ores. And they've shown us, it was such a multinational, one of the leading corporations in the field of mining, their plan in Peru, where they are building a tailing pond, you know, for mining exploitation. That was something like 120 meters high, and was initiated just for a large mining exploitation. So when you see this kind of, how can I say, endeavors, you understand that, of course, the things are getting more and more difficult. And for that reason, it is very important to reconsider all these basic aspects. We were talking about earlier with Boris Kosoy, he was mentioning about this aspect of Fukushima and the nuclear power plants, and also these aspects of cryptocurrencies, which if they were just some games of a club, of a small group of people exchanging something, they would have been nothing. But cryptocurrencies now are global plays, and they could impact in a very, very severe way our life. So from that perspective, aspects and attempts to reconsider the fundamental of scientific approaches is very essential. So once again, thank you for the course, thank you for the participation. As I said earlier, this record will be available also for others that would like to follow such a course. And those who would like to obtain even a certificate, we shall prepare small questionnaires with some of these topics and some of the notions, just in order to have a small formality for issuing the certificates. But at the same time, Professor Shuba, you presented that this is a series of courses. You are planning 9 courses that will be scheduled in the next weeks. And we hope that this set of courses will be a reference for this aspect of considering sustainability from the perspective of thermodynamics. Thank you very much for your contribution. And the next course will be probably from Constanza.
I hope so. I hope so. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. And again, this discussion is, I think it's a seed of a very, very interesting work that we can do. From what I saw from Saliolu's presentation and also from the comments of Professor Kosoi, I think we are onto something. We could leave a mark, as we say, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Boris, would you like to say something at the end?
Oh, I understand all people are tired from us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
nice evening. Bye.
I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.